welcome back. Tonight we have a special guest. We have Sara. She's a therapist, and she is going to solve all our, we are going to ask her many questions happening right now currently with the pandemic, and she's going to try to ease my and your worries in one quick session. Thank you for joining us, Sara.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Sara, I think the interesting thing to start with is, as a therapist, how are you doing? I know you probably ask your patients, how are you doing? But let's find out, how are you doing, Sara?
I'm doing good. I think helping my patients has helped me. So I think it gives me reminders on how I should help myself. So I tend to tell my clients to stay on a schedule and to work on mindfulness during their day, to focus on what they're doing. Mostly to handle their anxiety. So focus on exactly what they're doing at the moment so that they can stay in the moment rather than focus on the bad things going on in the world.
Are you saying that you should involve yourself in more Zen-like activities? Is that a suggestion right off the bat?
Well, that's one of the things. And it absolutely include yourself in different activities like movies, games, books, anything that you like to do in your personal and spare time.
Now, before we started to record, you said that because of the pandemic, your job has sort of changed. So that's where I was sort of going towards that being a therapist from home or doing, I don't want to speak for you, but doing teleconferencing, a whole new challenge for you that might even bring up some anxiety and worry with you and your patients.
Yes, I used to do my job in an office space, and so I used to see all my clients and greet them in a reception area and bring them back to my office. And now it is much more complex because we're doing it on a computer screen. And so it's greeting them through a computer and it's talking about their issues. And so it involves a lot more technical issues. So the first week has been a lot about helping my clients through their technical issues in trying to understand how to work the computer and how to get onto the specific telehealth site we're working with.
So let me ask you a question, because I would be very willing to go to therapy, but I'm the opposite of probably most people, where I would actually rather do teletherapy rather than drive to the office and maybe, being able to show up would be easier for me if I did teletherapy. And I'm just wondering, down the road, and be honest, what is your feelings about the usefulness and the outlook for teletherapy and for someone like me who's looking forward to teletherapy?
I actually, now that I've tried it, I'm finding I really like it. And I'm finding that it's no different than actually sitting in an office with somebody. You do find a lot of personalness and the ability to still be personal with somebody. It's difficult if you don't have that face-to-face contact though. So if it's just through a telephone, I find it more difficult. So I have done some telephone sessions that aren't as easy, but when you do it with screen, when you're making eye contact, it's still nice.
Right, so maybe teletherapy is the wrong word. We have to use Zoom therapy. I don't know what we're going to have to use as the, yeah, teletherapy is probably very difficult. It's the same with comedy. If you can't see emotional cues or I don't know how you work, I don't want to say, but as a comedian, you're always looking to, first of all, not step on somebody when they're talking and make sure that you're not missing something emotionally as they speak. So I would say teletherapy is probably not the right word, but virtual or video therapy is probably better. Now, the way I've been coping with this is two ways. One, I spend a lot of time with my dog, so that helps me. I also, unfortunately, fortunately, I do a lot of ranting on Facebook. So I live stream and I pretty much vent to coworkers and friends and family about what's going on because I can barely stand it. And I would tell you that I worked a night shift and I've always struggled with sleep, but lately, now we're just talking like you're my therapist, but lately, nightmares, less sleep, and definitely way more emotional ups and downs. And even for tonight's call, I was like, I'm not gonna make it. just don't have the energy. I don't have any of the energy to get here. So I don't know if those are proper coping mechanisms. I know that many different people cope in many different ways. And I guess you were speaking of mindfulness, but I don't know if there's steps to getting through a pandemic daily that we need to know. Like you said, scheduling, or there's something that I should be scheduling that may make my day less crazy. Is what it is.
Yeah, I recommend staying on a routine. So you need to find a routine that works for you. If you are a night person, obviously stay on that routine, stay on a night routine. And so I would recommend finding a proper routine, and then even finding a bedtime routine that you can handle, and probably shutting off your cell phone before bed. So not having it in your bed with you and not looking at the white lights, because those aren't healthy either. As I say that, I don't listen to it either. So.
But those are suggestions, and again, even for someone like you saying that to me as a patient, I would already get stressed out, like, oh my God, I can't do it. I wouldn't say it probably out loud to you because you're the therapist, but I would, as you're giving me the ideas, I'd be saying, oh my God, this is giving me more stress. And I think one of the things with therapy, and the reason why I vent on Facebook, is I feel like I can be my most honest. And I think a lot of times when people do therapy, one, obviously, as you know, there's a stigma to it. So, I was raised in a pretty macho house where, going to therapy is a no-no. Also, as a comedian, you might know I was a professional comedian. Sometimes comedians think that if they go to therapy, you're going to take away our funny because you're going to solve our issues that causes our comedy. And I would also say to you, strangely, because we have to get to that, is I am also a person who worries about the cost. And sometimes if you find a therapist that you may like, he might not be in your network, right? So now you're paying out of pocket every time, and you're just like, I don't know how I can pay for this. So that was a pretty long-winded question, but I would say, what are your feelings on universal health care, or eventually, my fear is that most people right now need access to therapy. That's my belief. I would say a high majority of this country, but I would say a high majority now losing their jobs, and they're afraid of the cost of healthcare. What's your feelings on that long-winded question I just gave you?
I believe very deeply in universal health care. I believe it's definitely a need. And I also believe very much that healthcare is a need in this country. And I believe there needs to be more access to it. And I believe more people would search it out if they didn't have such high copays, or if it wasn't so expensive. And I think the issue is that there are a lot of therapists out there who might possibly be in it for the money. I went the other route. I went to a rural area, and I do collect strictly from insurances or from people who are on Medicaid, only because I know that a lot of people will not go to those areas because Medicaid doesn't pay a lot. But the reason I do is because I know that a lot of people don't get therapy then. And so that's why I do it. And I really enjoy my clientele. And I really want to see my clientele. So, and that's why I fight. I know that they need it, and they wouldn't necessarily have it. And I see the insurance companies wanting to fight to say, no, we're not going to pay for therapy anymore,
And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but before the pandemic, is there a ballpark figure in your mind, or in any kind of data that says this percentage of the country probably requires therapy and this percentage of the country is not covered? I mean, is there percentage points that you can sort of grasp at, or be aware of, that I'm going to make up a number. Let's just say 10 million people probably should be in therapy in this country. I don't know if that's high, but 80% of health insurance,
And for me, I say 100% of people need therapy. And the reason I say that is because it's kind of like I say, people go to the doctor if they're not feeling well. And most people, well, I guess now they do. I would say they wouldn't think twice about it if they have a fever or if they have a bad cough. And even right now, they're going to go to the doctor. If something bad is happening in your life and you need somebody to talk to, why are we shunning people, and why are we making them feel bad about talking to somebody about it? And then you talked earlier about maybe not wanting to talk to anybody about it because you feel like you wouldn't tell a therapist everything. What we do in session is we do everything we can to normalize. So if you're funny, we laugh with you. That's what we do, and we use whatever we can to get you to talk to, and it's genuine because more than anything, that's what we want. So it ends up you walk out feeling like you just had a conversation with your best friend.
And another issue is, I definitely like the fact that I can do therapy with my dog. So that helps a
Yep.
lot too, as far as virtual. I don't know where I am in the epicenter, if you didn't know, Sarah. So I am in the epicenter. I live in Staten Island, but I work in Manhattan. So I'm in an area where they just said that 35% of people may test positive in New York City. That's the percentage rate where we are. So, I live with my wife and my dog. My daughter is not here. There's a lot of fear here in New York City about bringing home, because I'm an essential worker, bringing home the coronavirus to your family members. And is there a way, again, to, I think one of the bigger issues that you find when you're quarantined, there's two issues here, right? So if you're quarantined, communication between loved ones is going to get strained because you're trapped in. And also it's going to be strained as you're coming back in every day with a possible virus and maybe not doing all the proper things that you should be doing to protect your loved ones because you're just stressed and you're forgetting. What are some of the things that you should be saying in your head to sort of understand what another person is going through? What can I do to sort of get myself out of my own head to maybe have more empathy and compassion for the person who is quarantined and I'm coming home to them?
I think it's just being able to hear them, to listen to them, and to say, where are you at right now? How are you feeling right now? And really hearing them. Because I think so often we'll say to somebody, how are you? But we're really not wanting to know the answer. But actually saying, how are you? And finding out the answer. And then if they say just fine, really find out if it's fine or if they're just saying that in passing, because so many of us will say fine, but really they're not fine. And I think that's where being able to check in with somebody and really finding out where somebody is, because I think so often we're so conditioned to say, how are you? And then the other person says, fine. That's not really the case so often.
So maybe always come in, ask the question, then do a couple of follow-ups, gauge what's going on, and then maybe back
Yeah.
out.
And I think having the opportunity, the ability to really look them in the eye to know, I think when you make eye contact, the person really knows you care, and that you really want to know how they're doing. Because interpersonal communication really does matter.
And I would guess the other issue from my side is I'm involved with alternative media here and trying to strike out on my own. And I'm probably, oh no, there's no doubt about it, probably the biggest issue is me consuming so much information worldwide. What's happening in each country, what's happening in each state, what's happening in my city, what's happening in my borough. Family, friends, coworkers. I mean, I'm a shop steward in the union, so I'm responsible for people and their grievances and fears. So I mean, I'm going to put you on the spot again. Do you limit yourself to a source, one particular source like NPR, just Democracy Now? Or is there a source that you trust and go, okay, I'm sticking with that and I'm just going to work with that? Or do you find yourself at times over consuming information?
I tend to be an overconsumer of information too. A lot of alternative media. Lately, I've been turning on the more popular media, I should say, CNN, only because I'm trying to find out what's really going on. But I don't believe for a second that they're telling us the truth, but I am trying to find out some of the numbers of how bad it is, like in New York City, for instance, where you're at.
Now, so two questions. One is, are you I don't know how to ask you this, but are you aware of the reality of the PPE situation locally? I don't. Again, I'm sorry. Where were you coming? Where do you do your therapy?
I live in Minnesota right now.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So are you aware of what's
I,
happening in your state as far as PPE and the virus and how being handled there. And just again, I don't want to give out information, but is there a tone in Minnesota that you can pick up on as a therapist of what you're feeling in Minnesota right now?
Well, my husband works in healthcare, and he, yeah, there is. I mean, when it hits here to the point that it's hitting there, there's probably not going to be enough, and we know this. So that's a factor that is making a lot of healthcare workers nervous. And we hope it's going to kind of hold off for a while because we see what you guys are going through.
The other issue that I would say that I'm having that I don't know if a lot of people are having, I've never been a hypochondriac, but I don't think there's a day that passes that I don't believe that I have a symptom of COVID-19, which is whether I'm feeling hot, I'm feeling chest pains, I'm feeling tightness, I'm feeling lethargic. So I'm not a person who normally feels like they're sick, but every day I go through bouts of like, I think I might have it, and I have to sort of talk myself down. But there's no one really to talk to because you don't want to freak somebody else out because then they're going to be reactive, right? So again, it's really sort of a lonely experience that I feel at times that we're dealing with because I don't have a therapist, so I can't come to you and unfortunately this is how I speak, but I can't come to you and dump it on Sara and then walk out and feel better. I have to go and dump it on somebody else, and just I know I'm adding to their load, right? So my fear is, again, since I don't have a therapist, that I tend to just, I mean, this is why I'm Facebook ranting as my therapy, but there's always a fear of, dumping on somebody else, whether it be a loved one or a coworker or a friend. And like I told you, historically, my whole life, that has been my issue. I don't like to tell people my problems because I don't want to get inside their head, and I just want to cope myself. So again, therapy is something that I need, but I don't know unless virtual therapy becomes a fad or a thing after the pandemic. I'm still going to hold all this stuff in, which I think is completely unhealthy. What do you say to a person like me who tries to macho it out or tough it out? Or I'm not, because I'm Facebook ranting, but for the most part, I probably would do that. What do you say to that person?
I
Like
do.
frontliners, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but frontliners, cops, essential workers who this is their job to be tough, and they're like, they're shaky now. What do we do? How do they cope, or how do we help them? I mean, it's really so much to bear.
And it is, and that's why I say like 100% of the population needs therapy, because what I always tell people is I say, when you reach a stressor, it's like a beach ball and you're holding it underneath the water, and you can only hold it underneath the water for so long. And if you don't let it up, what happens? Your arms get tired, and you can only hold it there for so long before you blow or you burst, and so you have to talk about it. You have to be able to talk and to rant and to rave, and you usually need somebody to rant or to rave to. And I always say family members aren't the best people because they're biased, so you typically want to go to somebody who isn't involved in the situation on some level, who's just kind of outside of it. So what I do say to somebody who obviously doesn't have that ability is try to go to somebody who obviously isn't part of your family and is maybe way out that you can trust. But that's usually,
I think that's hard for people to understand, but I totally get it. So if you go to someone who may have past resentments about you, or your weaknesses, if they know things about you, they might coach, or they're going to give you the answer that they might think best works for you instead of maybe what the right answer is. How does, so let's just take a person, so I often think of the worst person in this scenario, the person without health insurance, the person who did get COVID-19, but even more so, okay, I don't have health insurance. I can't see a therapist. Is there a number I can call? Is there some sort of outreach that works with people who, again, money is the issue with therapy? What do I tell somebody who's like, oh, I want to go to therapy, but I'm broke and I'm poor or whatever? I mean, I'm trying to put myself in a place where I could go to therapy. I have insurance. But what do we say to the person who wants to go but is so afraid of the cost?
I would tell them to call their local social services and search out that way. Otherwise, if suicide is possibility. It's also, there's typically a hotline for, particularly for states, but there's also a national hotline. And those are always things you need to watch out for, the suicide possibility.
So there is a family history here, and for me, I always afraid of even admitting maybe that you're having suicidal thoughts, because in what I know about that, so if you told me that, I'd be afraid, because what I know is if you say you're having suicidal thoughts, they're going to lock you up, which is like the worst possible time to. I mean, there's no good time to want to be locked up. But once you mention like I want to hurt myself or I feel suicidal, they're going to come. In my mind, they're going to come take you and they're going to put you in, in some lockdown therapy ward or mental ward, and you're just put yourself at triple, double, just the risks. So again, that's another. I don't know how we handle the stigma or the reactiveness of someone saying, "Hey, I'm feeling suicidal." I mean, how do we work on that area? Is there something we can change in the law down the road, or what's your feelings on someone being afraid to admit, "Oh, I'm suicidal," but knowing that they could be locked up for saying such a thing?
Yes, and I do think we need to change the whole perspective then of mental health therapy and mental health as a whole, because even people mentioning they have bipolar disorder, it's starting to get a little bit better where people aren't looked at as so different or so bad if they have bipolar, or if they have borderline personality disorder, or if they have schizophrenia. Um, the people we pass on the streets, the people who appear completely normal to us, can have a mental health disorder. And we may not know it. The most common that we're seeing is depression and anxiety. And I would say that more than 80% of the people that we run into probably do have one of those two disorders. They may go up undiagnosed, but that's really common. And so we have
also, I guess maybe it would be great down the road. I'm just brainstorming here. I don't know if group therapy sessions can work, or I don't know, because I'm always thinking about the numbers and how you would handle the numbers of people right now that would require therapy. And I don't even know what the ratio is in this country. You talk about the actual doctors to patients. I don't know what the ratio is for therapists in this country.
I think you're hitting the mark right there. Is even like community group therapy, community support groups would be a great start for people, so that they feel like they're not so alone.
But unfortunately, it would have to be done on Zoom right now.
Yeah, right now, absolutely. And I would even be willing to volunteer my time to start something like that, just because I know there's such a need. I care about people that much, and I think there's a lot of people out there who do.
Now, this will be probably cut out from the. This will probably be cut out from this episode, but I want to ask you and you don't have to answer this question. What is your professional opinion about our president? What would you think are some of his issues maybe that he needs to work on?
My professional opinion, without getting in trouble with
I was going to say, I'm setting you up. Maybe you could just prescribe a pill. Like, are you a psychiatrist, psychologist? Can we just get him some medicine, or?
No, he's probably beyond that. When we're describing a personality disorder, you can only work on the symptomology of a personality disorder. And we're seeing definitely a personality disorder with him. It's a narcissistic personality disorder. And that's, he's.
So yeah, I don't want to get in too much trouble. So how do I deal with what I believe is gaslighting? How does one cope with media style gaslighting on a day-to-day basis?
You can't participate, unfortunately. It's like you're seeing in his daily, you see him daily going up there, and then you see the media asking him questions, and they do confront him on some of the things that he's already said, and he knows he's been wrong. He cannot admit that he was wrong.
And I would say to you some of the coping mechanisms that I do use, just so you can maybe throw in your own. Taking a bath. A lot of times I take Epsom salt baths, try to relax. I walk my dog every day. Like I said, I do rant on Facebook. I just don't know what other healthy coping mechanisms maybe people can be reaching out to that you think have had a history of working for yourself or has, any kind of scientific research that does work.
Yes, right now, you're hitting it right on the dot. It's the self-care is extremely important for what everybody's going through right now. And so it is the baths, it is the taking your dog for a walk, it is going out for walks, it is the making recipes that you enjoy because you have the time now. It's taking, you know, doing the things that you've always wanted to do. If it's planting flowers in the house, do it, until you can get outside and plant those flowers, start your garden inside, do something. Just do the things that really make you happy. You can find a way to do those things. It's just that you can't do them socially.
And now from
Um,
the other side of the people who aren't the essential workers, but maybe have to interact with essential workers, how do we show our gratitude, our thankfulness to the essential workers? What is it that we can do on a regular basis when we're out there and maybe not understanding again what this person who's being underpaid and putting their job, putting their life at risk? Again, how do we approach them in a way that they would find appropriate and would be helpful for them?
Well, I think so many of the essential workers now are afraid to go out in public in their scrubs um, because of what has happened already to them. So, we can't recognize them now. But, I think even sending cards or treats, if they're pre-wrapped and stuff to the hospitals, I think would be a great way to just show them that we're thinking about them and that we appreciate what they're doing.
And then again, the last issue that I would ask you about with children, and I know this is probably way too work intensive as a question, but with children, again, what is our fear? Again, we've never been here, so I'm putting you on the spot. You've never had to deal with children in a pandemic, but we did have 9/11. And what is the best way? I have a 20-year-old who went down to Virginia because she's so fearful of being in New York City. She doesn't communicate that well. But again, that would be another issue. Is I know it's our age range, so it's difficult to answer this question. But again, I would think that children are also, and I heard in foster care that children are really struggling right now. So again, that's a whole other, obviously, arm of something that we need to talk about is children who are in foster care. But just if you could give us some guidelines again with dealing with children, I guess that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's really important to not keep the news on all the time. I have a lot of children that I can't see right now that I used to do child therapy or play therapy with that I do check in with. Just I don't bill them. I just kind of get them on the screen and talk to them and say, "Hey, how's it going?" and stuff like that. And I kind of ask them what activities they're doing, and then I kind of give them like little like scavenger hunts to do during the week. And then I check in with him the next week, and stuff like that. I think it's really important to keep them busy and to plan fun activities with them, like cooking activities or stuff like that, so that it isn't all about what's happening on the news and what's happening in the world, because sometimes it's just too much reality, and they don't understand it. They just think, "Oh my gosh, I could die," or mom could die, or dad could die, or grandma and grandpa could die.
The other thing I would tell you that I know about mental health, particularly from, and this is in my opinion, but I also have a family history. Like I said, I think one of the big issues that people don't realize is during something like this is lack of sleep. Now I work nights anyway, and I do get lack of sleep. I am just a creature of lack of sleep. That's my lifestyle. But now it's getting worse and worse. And I'm just wondering, as a therapist, do you have your favorite methods to fall asleep that work for you, and also what you would suggest for someone like, again, I sleep during the day, so that's an issue in itself. But what are some of the ways that you help yourself get a good night's rest during a
Um, there's a really great app that you can get on your phone called Calm. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
pandemic? I have,
Um,
yes.
Okay, I really love that app because I think as it plays, it automatically goes lower and lower as it gets to a certain point. And so as you're listening to it, and as you're really kind of drifting off, it'll automatically shut off on you. So it's a really nice app in that sense. So that's a really great one. one. Sometimes a weighted blanket helps, especially somebody who has anxiety. So using a weighted blanket is a really good one. I often use on my children a therapy brush. So if you've ever seen a therapy brush, it's just kind of like a baby brush that you use on a baby's hair. But then I'll, before bed, I'll brush their backs or brush their arms and stuff like that. And so they know that that's part of their bedtime process before they go to bed. So,
That's
so
true. There are many, I would tell you, doctor, that there are many apps out there. You can have, there are a couple apps where you can have sort of robotic friends that talk to you. There's apps where you can do like, they ask you questions and you can talk and it records, or you can type. I would think also journaling is probably a good idea right now.
that's an excellent one. That's an excellent one. And I think it's a great way to clear your head before bed. And even if you're stressing, I always say to my clients, make a list of the things that you're stressed about so that you can say, I'm going to save this for later. So put it by your bed, make the list, and say, I'm saving it for later. That way then it's off your brain.
That's actually the best idea and something that I really need to start doing so I can put those thoughts down and have them stop boomeranging pinballing in my head. Now they're down on the list and I can make a priority and I can say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to take care of some of these things. So that might be for me the best advice is start making some lists, some priority lists that can sort of eliminate some of the worries.
And and people look at me like I'm crazy because I always say prescribe. I always say, I prescribe the problem. So I'll say, well, if you're really anxious, I'll say, I want you to take the time from 6 to 6:30, and I want you to become extremely anxious. And I want you to take that time from 6 to 6:30 and just be as anxious as you can between that time and worry about everything that you're worrying about normally. And I want you to stress during that time like you normally would all day. But then once that time is over, you can't stress anymore. And you have to remind yourself that you took that time to stress already. Because right now we can't fix anything.
I like
right?
the idea, except if you're living with someone. If you're like, hey, I'm just going to go stress out for an hour. I'll be back. I'm going to need no interruptions. So that may be the one issue. But I do like the writing down of the list. I'm going to actually take that one and make sure that I do have a pen and paper. And when I'm having fears that are just, I need to do that on a regular basis. And I also feel like that idea, honestly, would be good if you could get into, sharing it with your loved one and saying, here's what's going on with me. Take a look, because maybe they can step in. I can handle that and I can handle that. I think maybe that's a better way to communicate instead of just coming in and dumping on somebody, right? You're just like, so what's your list of worries today? You just put it on the table, you go take a look at that, and you walk away. That's a really, that will help me immensely. So, I want to thank you. I know that you're very busy and I know that you're very stressed out. And I really do appreciate you taking the time to speak to me because I do need a therapist. I am afraid of the cost. I am afraid of the scheduling. I am afraid of disappointing you and not showing up for the session and all that anxiety. So this will probably be my last therapy session for the next 10 years. So
Well, anytime you want to talk, you just get in touch with me.
Thanks again, Sarah. I really appreciate. Have a good night. Good luck with all your patients and all your work. We really appreciate everything you do. You're also a frontline worker to me, an essential worker, and I really appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you. It was great getting to know you.
Good night, Tara.
Good night.